Hey guys, this is Eric Weingarten with Weingarten Racing. Today's video is talking about the 2-barrel engine that went on the dyno. What you just saw was like a preview of the bad stuff that happens. That's a very short dyno clip, and we'll get to all that in a minute. But let's start off by talking about what that engine was, why it was done that way, and some different things. And you might find me rambling on in this video, and well, it's because why not? I'm waiting for the Dyno to dry so I can describe some stuff on these heads to get done porting and whatever. Here's the engine combination, or I should tell you some of the history of it. So the guy that works for me, his name is Keith. He works 1 day a week on Fridays. Really nice guy. Anyway, he races circle track at Salina High Banks here in Oklahoma. He'll race at other places too. He's not afraid of that. But anyway, he used to run pure stock. So pure stock rules are different everywhere. And by the way, I love circle track. I really do. I just can't do it. I tried driving and I suck. And if you guys, for all those drag racers that think, man, it's so expensive, go get in a circle track. Just to give you an idea, I go race at the drag strip. It costs me 30 bucks to race. That's just me. If any of the crew members want to go on the track, it's 15 bucks, okay? And constantly people will complain about that. Go to a circle track race, it's $30 for each crew member to go, at least. Some are 35. And then I think to race, it's even higher. Depends on which class you're in, but it's pretty dang high, expensive. Plus, you look at fuel costs. Granted, the Camaro runs on 116. I think I spent 177 bucks for 10 gallons, about 17 bucks a gallon. Those IMC modified, some running like 112, 114. But they're going through gallons and gallons of it. So their fuel costs are decidedly higher. They have to replace tires more often. There's wrecks more often. Circle track's expensive. Love it. Far more entertaining though. So anyway, back to Keith and his engine. He'd been in pure stock before. And like I said, the thing about circle track is none of their rules are really from track to track, they'd be so different. Very few are the same. But his pure stock rules were it had to be a 350, couldn't be stroked at all. You had to have a stock appearing rods, a cast steel crankshaft, had to be hydraulic flat tappet, had to pull 15 inches of vacuum. I wanted to say it couldn't puff more than 150 on the cranking compression. It had to pull at least 15 inches of vacuum, and it had to run on a 2-barrel and stock exhaust manifolds. For those that don't know, because you're going to see these dyno horsepower numbers, you're like, man, that's really low. And it is. But it's because they put all these dumb rules on them. Oh, yeah. The factory stock also, you had to run a cast iron manifold and from the factory. And you had to run these spec heads, which are worse than a Vortec head. So pretty much they just make the engine suck. And the idea was, we're to keep costs down. And that never keeps costs down. Well, Keith said, I'm going to step up to factory stock. And factory stock rules weren't that different. Here's what he got to have instead. He got to, now there's no lift rule on the cam. Before he had a 450 lift. So no lift rule on the cam. And you can run 14 inches of vacuum. There is an RPM limit, but it depends on what you do with the engine. I won't overly confuse you with that. And you can run an aluminum intake manifold. So anyway, and by the way, these 2-barrel carburetors are spec carburetors. In other words, there's a gauge that goes inside, and you have to be a certain bore on the venturi and also underneath where the throttle plate is. Then they have to have that air tower too. You can't run the XP design that has no choke tower. You actually have to have the choke tower. So anyway, when he switched that, he already had all the stuff for the pure stock. And this engine you're seeing dyno, I had no part of it. It sounds like I'm justifying, and I guess I kind of am. He had gotten the short block from someplace in Minnesota, and the only thing that really bothered me about it, it's a cast crankshaft. I think it's a GM one. It's a one-piece remain seal. But the only thing that bothered me about two things that bothered me about it was when I saw it, I said, they put the balancing hole right between the cheek, so we have rod here, journal here, crank journals here, there's an overlap. They drilled a hole for balancing in between those two, which is the weakest part of the crank. You should never drill that. And I've never even seen it done there before. I was like, I'm a little worried about that, but whatever. The second thing that bothered me is they took stock rods and from like a Vortec engine, and all they did was put ARP rod bolts in and threw it together. By the way, the pistons also have a rule. You have to be a 4-valve relief piston. And of course the 5/64 ring, so dumb. Also, you have to run 3/8 rocker studs. I forgot about that. And since he switched to factory stock, in pure stock, you could run a, you can only run a roller tip rocker. You couldn't run a full roller rocker. In factory stock, they'll let you run a full roller rocker. It'll make sense in a second. So anyway, whenever I only thing part of the engine I did was I spec'd him a camshaft, but I spec'd him a camshaft when he was running pure stock, which would be, again, 450 lift rule, and 15 inches vacuum, couldn't pull, I think it was 150 cranking compression. So you're gonna see the hydraulic flat tapping, by the way. You're gonna see the cam specs and you're like, wow, yeah, exactly. Anyway, so he wanted to switch to factory stock. So only thing, he put a former EPS manifold on it. You saw the carb if you watched the previous video. And I'll tell you about the whole dyno experience with that. He put that 2-barrel on there, that former EPS manifold, and we went to the dyno. Now, by the way, I didn't even do the heads. The only thing I did was refresh them. Someone else, and if you look at one of my videos, I won't tell you which one, you could see this heads. These heads are illegal. You're not allowed to port the heads. I didn't port the head, someone else did, and Ray Charles would spot it. So I don't mind telling you this because it's too obvious. They didn't even try hiding it. But it wouldn't matter, and this is for all of you out there. And drag racers don't have to worry about this, but circle track guys do. And this sounds cruel, but for all you circle track guys, don't worry about being illegal until you get into the top 5 and actually have to get tore down. Otherwise, why? I know you're like, oh, it's my own pride and I want to say I'm legal. That's perfectly okay. But there's no sense, and I told him too, I was like, because he's like, I think I should get new heads. I was like, no, you have to actually get torn down before they see that those heads are illegal. So you have to do well. So if you don't do well, they're not tearing down the last place car. And I'm not saying he's going to finish last or nothing, but they're not going to do that. So once that happens, then spend the money. So anyway, the heads actually flow pretty decent, by the way. They flow like 241 on intake, and I think like 160 on exhaust. So I have to keep itching. I was grinding this billet aluminum spacer. Billet aluminum makes these shards that are just like splinters in you. Anyway, so we get on the dyno. We go to Dunsworth Dyno. Now, Dunsworth Machines in Enid, Oklahoma. His dyno is the most conservative one I've been on, just straight out telling you. But I love him because he does a great job of breaking in flat tappet camshafts. And all those people that say, I don't need a dyno, you need a dyno, especially for breaking in these flat tappets. The way he does it, it's amazing, and it keeps it working great. He does so many because he's primarily circle track that he's pretty much nailed it, and it's good. So anyway, we do break in the camshaft and we make some initial pulls. An initial pull, and I'm not making this up, it's low. It makes 330 horsepower and like 370 foot-pounds of torque. And it made 330 horsepower, I think, at 5,800 RPM. And the torque might have actually been higher, but we started the pulls at like 4,000 or 41. So the torque's actually, it's slanting. So I guess it'd be this way for you guys. It's slanting down. So in other words, if we had pulled it like, say, 2,500 RPM to 6,000 RPM, we probably would have saw peak torque at like 3,000, and it might have been 390 or 400. But we only went from 4,000 to 62, I want to say, in the beginning, just because that's the range he runs. But it made things easier. So anyway, it's low. It's low. But he goes, let me make another pull and let's see if it gains anymore. And we're changing nothing. And usually when you make back-to-back pulls, what happens is the power actually, might increase slightly because the oil's getting warmer. And so it's thinner, so it takes less horsepower for the pump to turn. So there's that. But the oil was already hot. So, because we'd done the whole break-in cycle and everything with this. So the oil was pretty warm. Anyway, makes the next pull and it's up like 5 horsepower. Well, then he does another one just to make sure it's not going to keep gaining because everything's getting broke in, and it stays the same. So now we can start making changes. Now, if you watch that video about the carburetor and how I said it was cool, it's because it is cool. It had the rapid jets, so you could pull out the emulsion tubes and really quickly change the jets. Well, it was rich, like it was in the 11s. So I dropped 2 jet sizes and we make another pull, and it's up to like 336 horsepower and like 380 foot-pounds of torque. So it's gained pretty good, but still in the low 12. So I'm thinking, let's try maybe another 2 jets out. And actually, no, we're like, let's add some timing, because it's gonna, when you add timing, typically it leans things out. So we had timing, and it really didn't change anything. It stayed the same. So we went from like 35, I want to say, to 38, and it really just didn't change a thing. So in that point, we're like, let's take a little bit more jet out. Take a little bit of jet out, and it didn't really, it gained maybe a horsepower. But the thing was, it would go, when you start the pool, it'd be rich, and then it would go lean like almost perfect, like 12.8, and then go back to being fat. I'm like, oh man, that sucks. But Mark had sent these other emulsion tubes with the carburetor. And so we could change those out, because those rapid jets, you could change them and it'll change your fuel curve. So anyway, we pull out the rapid jet, pull out the whole tube, change the tube, put the same jet back in, slap in. We go to make a pool, and that's the video you saw at the beginning. So at this point, we're like pool 7, so 7 runs. And that's what you saw at the beginning. And let me describe what's happening. He's loading the dyno, and we're starting the pools like at 4,000. And then what's weird when we're there is it seemed like it was a long time, but when I was recording it and I looked, it's literally that fast. Because I'm watching the video again, you'll watch it at the beginning again too. It's super quick. In other words, it revs and then it pops. And this is what it did. All right, here's the carnage from the dyno, just to give you an idea. So what happens when you're making the pool, and then it made a slight miss, and we stopped right away. And so usually when that happens, you can look for a bunch of things, but typically it's something in the valve train. So we pull out the valve cover, and we see this in the head. So this is broke off. And a good rocker, not this one, with the polylock still attached to the actual other part of the rocker arm stud, was just sitting in the valve cover where it popped out, or it was in the valve cover when it was taken off. And we're like, oh, dang, man, that sucks. Wonder what happened. No idea, really. Anyway, so we looked down on the engine block, and the lifter actually got popped out of the lifter bore, which is also scary, because if you know anything about small block Chevys, the oil passes right through that, and it drops your oil pressure when it comes out. But luckily, they shut it down, and no issues there. Good news is also, the lifter wasn't just laying here. It actually popped out of the bore and was standing straight up. So we were able to fish around without taking off the intake manifold, drop it back in the hole, good to go to make more runs. However, in order to do that, so we get room to move around with our screwdrivers to mess with that, we took off the intake rocker. This is the intake rocker. It's not from the one that broke off. So I take it off, and I'm like, okay, what the hell? Just like that, and this is no joke. So I'm like, man, something happened here. So let me show you. So at first we thought, well, the snap ring came out. Clearly they're still there, and it fell through. Now these are Proform rockers. They're not great rockers, let's say that. This is an old set of Proforms I have. As you can tell, just so you can kind of see what I'm talking about, they're pressed in and they're held in place. So somehow this bearing part is out of this. But if you look at it, like, well, how did that happen? Look at the housing. It's egg-shaped, and you can also see signs of fretting on this side, like it's about to come apart. And then, when you turn it this way, that ain't right. I mean, it's supposed to look something like straight, not curved. This is not how they come. It's not even curved in the same direction. So as you can tell, the reason why the bearing came out is because it wasn't because it got too hot or wasn't pressed in right. Something caused it to bend enough where this came loose and popped out. And as you can tell, on top of here, there's a mark. So what we think happened is when this broke, this other rocker flew off, landed here, or probably here, hit the top of the valve cover and wouldn't let the rocker do what it's supposed to on this one right here, and then started yanking it this way. Now we shut it off in time, but it definitely screwed that one up. So we're like, man, I hope to God this valve isn't bent. The push rods are really stiff and they're still fine. So we take off those. We actually undo the valve spring itself, take that out to make sure that the valve can move freely in the head. Exhaust one moves freely. Go to the intake, it moves freely. Thank God. Because one of the fears is it stuck a valve or bent a valve. So those are fine. So then we're like, well, we can't use this one, obviously. So we put on just a stamped steel rocker arm with a roller tip, put that on the exhaust, and put the better one on the intake, and started up, made another pull 6400,
all's good. You'll see that video here in a second. And then we made 3 more runs after that, and everything seems fine. I have no idea the reason why this broke besides this. My buddy Keith here, the guy that works for me, I'm not saying he's cheap, but he's kind of cheap. These rock arm studs were on the heads before, and I didn't do anything part with this heads besides freshen them up, so I had no part of the rock arm studs. But anyway, what had happened was he had the same heads on an engine that blew up, and I don't know exactly what happened, but the cam broke in about 1,000 different pieces, and it broke a bunch of valve train stuff. But these are the same rocker studs that were in there, so chances are they're either bent or cracked or something. And things were going fine on the dyno until this one says, "I've had enough of your shit," and broke. And anyway, so it's back together. We made 3 pulls. Everything seems fine. Knock on wood that it keeps being fine, but anyway, there you go.
Okay, so I said I made 3 more pulls. We did 3 more pulls after it broke and fixed it. Well, I don't know if I told you this, because I'm recording different parts at different times. But the rocker we used on the exhaust, because we didn't have a spare one, was one that Dunsworth had, and it was just a stamp steel with a roller tip, but it was a 1:5:2 ratio, and we put that on the exhaust. So the next pull was actually right after we broke stuff, and we make another pull. That's actually the highest horsepower one we have, and it gains 2 horsepower. That's it. And this is the amazing part. So after changing those rapid jets, and by the way, this pull you're about to see, I'm going to show you in just a second. This is right after it broke it. So we had the emulsion tubes now. We've got those changed. We've got everything where it's hopefully fixed. And he did a longer pull. He went from 4,000 to 6,500 RPM, because there is an RPM limit for 6,500 for some rule. So he wanted to see how stable it'd be. That's this pull.
I don't know if we should get that out last time. And a 13.1 that time. Then 12s did touch down into 11 at 5,500.
So, and by the way, this is the best pull. So the ones we're going to do 2 more after this. And really, I don't know, Keith's kind of a little scared at this point because the engine was broke and now it's okay. But really, I was like, we need to make a couple more pulls, because I'd rather find out here than you get out on the track and then it pops anyway. So it's much easier. So we made 2 more pulls, and the horsepower for each one of them really didn't change. It lost a little torque, and that's because the water temperature itself was getting warmer. So then you're going to lose some because of the warmer water, but not like a lot. For the most part, it stayed within 2 or 3 horsepower for the next 2 pulls. So it really didn't make any difference. Now, what do I learn? Because that's really what we're about here, is learning. And that's why I guess you guys tune in. I know it's not my brilliant personality. But anyway, here's what I learned. And several people had said this. The exhaust gas temperatures are insanely high on 2-barrel engines. So much so, I'd be willing to bet they're almost as high, or maybe even higher, than some of the nitrous exhaust gas temperatures. I am not joking. Do I know exactly the reason for it? No. Because people had said it before, and I was like, whatever. It can't be any higher than a 4-barrel. It's something about these restricted engines with the 2-barrel carburetors. Their exhaust gases are high, extremely high. The reason why I'm telling you this, and this is probably, most people don't admit their mistakes. I straight up tell you, they only give you the rosy scenarios, and everything that they've done good's amazing. So people think that they're amazing. I will not. In the last 3 weeks, we've had 2 engines that I've done heads for where it stuck a valve on the 2-barrel deals. And I don't do that many, by the way, but that doesn't sound good. So the first one was a set of EQ heads, and it stuck an intake valve, not an exhaust valve. Now here's what's weird. It had been running before. All I did was freshen it up. So the guide clearance was exactly what it was running before. Stuck an intake valve. No idea why. Talked to some people and they think it might have been bad fuel because after all that fuel had been sitting in the car for 6 months, and that lubricates the intake valve, and that's why it failed. That one did a lot of damage. It ruined the head and it just ruined the engine. The second one, oh, by the way, the other thought was on it, it might have been because it had cast iron guides. I've heard that. The second one was a set of darts, and the guide actually switched over to bronze. I had done the heads originally. He had run them all last year and had no problems with cast iron guides. But this year when he freshened up, he had someone else put in the bronze guides, and he brought it to me to have the valve job and everything, all the other freshening done. He had actually supplied the valves too. And the valves he supplied were the Ferrea 5000 series. So anyway, he goes out and runs, and he makes it to the heat. This is a B mod. God forgive you for all this. I know a lot of stuff. B mods are kind of like factory stock, except for they can't run full roller rockers. They also have a chip roll, but they're restricted the same way. And they look like an IMCA modified body, but there's just not, I mean, that's what they look like from the outside, but there's some slight differences. More major, but anyway. He had stuck a valve, and you'll probably see it in this other video because I used it to record when I was talking about some other video. I can't remember which one I've already recorded. But he stuck the Ferrea valve on the exhaust, which was weird because I did the guide clearances. They were the same as what I used for anything else. I didn't even put in a seal on the exhaust guide, so it's free flowing with oil, so it's definitely not because it didn't have oil. But it stuck an exhaust guide. The thing is though, is his was extremely lucky in the fact that it S'd the exhaust valve, like bent it into an S, but it didn't really do any chamber damage. It didn't break off the head of the valve, and it did minor marks on the thing. He just spotted it because it was missing and pulled it back in. So he brought it to me, and what I did was now, and we'll see if this should fix it. I loosened up the exhaust guide clearance another 0.5 thousandths to make it extremely loose. So it's now like 2.5 thousandths on the intake. Before it was like 2.2. Actually, sorry, right now it's 2.6 to 2.7. Before it was 2.2, which I thought would have been fine. And I say this because there's another guy who runs modified A mods, and I had his guide clearance at tighter actually. Some of them are 18 to 2 on the exhaust. But he's A mod, which is 4-barrel, and never stuck it and ran seasons. And several others did it the same way, no problems. It's something with these 2-barrel deals. So anyway, loosened up the guides, and his are back together, and we'll get to see him running. In the meantime, I also done another set of dart heads, and those have been running fine. He spun a rod bearing, bad luck, but that head's had no problem. So why am I telling you all this stuff? Because people kept saying it's because the exhaust gas temperatures are too high. And again, I thought, there's no way they're matching the stuff we're doing with this drag race stuff. No way, we're putting out way more power. Incorrect. So when we were watching it on the dyno with this 2-barrel engine, because it did teach me a lot, the exhaust gas temperature was 1375. To give you an idea, my sister's engine, it was 1250. And by the way, we were back to back in them. So it was like, my sister's engine was really close together when we were dynoing it. So I might make a small change and run again and run again. So, and it was pretty much staying at 1250. When we're doing this on that 2-barrel, it was 1375. And honestly, I think if we kept running, it probably would have got 1400. Usually when exhaust gas temperatures are highest because you don't have enough timing. But now it had 38 in it. So yeah. Why do I say that? Because when you go look back at that last one with the Ferrea 5000 series valves that was using that stuck the valve, his had a couple things that might give away some clues of what happened. That Ferrea 5000 series isn't rated to 1300 degrees at all. So he's now has upgraded Ferrea valves on the exhaust side. In truth, I probably should, from now on, I probably will use a special alloy on the exhaust, almost like an Incontinental alloy on those 2-barrel deals because of the same amount of heat. He's at 6000 series now, but I think here's what got him. And this will be a warning to all you. When he brought the heads back, the exhaust ports were rusty. And I know you're thinking, what's that got to do with anything? His exhaust gasket, header gasket was leaking because he didn't run gaskets. He ran just the silicone. And if you know anything about the circle track carts, I mean, you get a rough track, they bounce around. Well, that header's going to wobble, even though he's got a strap on it. So it's breaking that loose, that silicone. And you can see where it's burned out around because the paint's all burned off on the head. It's going to suck back in cool air, and you've got such an insanely high, extremely high temperature on that exhaust valve, and you have cool stuff hitting it. It causes it to warp. And I think that's actually what happened, is it warped the valve, and then it got a little bend in it, and then it no longer could stay. That's a guess. But for sure, I told him, man, you need to seal this up. There's no way this is good for it. I shouldn't see scale of rust on the inside of your exhaust port. It looks like you've got water. By the way, I did pressure test the head. So, lessons to be learned: if you run a 2-barrel class, you should really run almost an Inconel exhaust valve. Do not run the cheapest stuff, even though you're like, hydraulic flat tappet, I've got like 115 pounds on the seat. What do I need these expensive valves for? You do for the exhaust, for sure. One of the guys, Rex, said it was because of the camshaft. So this I might change too. I don't mind showing you these cam specs or whatever, but it's like, don't run split patterns because that actually builds exhaust heat. So on our drag race stuff, because we're non-restricted, we don't ever get these heats. He's like, you should run a standard pattern, never big splits. So I guess that could be a lesson for you. I'm going to try that later and we'll see. But anyway, there's that. I'm telling you all this because I really want you to get some more out of this video. And let me show you the cam specs, and then we'll go on with some other stuff. Here's the cam that I use for his circle track deal. So remember, this was supposed to be a 450 lift, and you're like, wait a minute, you got 474 and 463. Yes, and I said, the reason why, and he's like, this will be illegal. No, I promise you, if they would check this at the track, because of deflection, so this is ideal, like perfect. But we know when you put real springs on, you lose lift. He's going to check about 450 easy. I'm not worried about this if it had been that way. However, all that's worthless because he doesn't even have a lift rule anymore. He also, his vacuum rule now is 14 inches, not 15. This will pull more than 15. So it's 109 lobe separation. This is duration, 218, 223. So that's a 5-degree split. Next time I might run closer. By the way, I don't think this is a great cam. That's why I'm showing it to you. I think I might have, it might have been good for what he was going to do, but it ain't good for what it is. So anyway, there's that. Since you stuck around, I want to also tell you something else for you guys. Happy Easter. Because hopefully this gets aired on Easter and everything went smoothly. And you guys have a happy Easter. You guys be safe. Next thing, you know, I watch some other YouTube channels, and Cletus McFarland always ends with "Do It for Dale," but I'm going to end with, you guys should watch Scrubs. I love that show. Scrubs was a medical, not drama, medical comedy show that was from like 2001 to 2009. Go back and watch that. That thing is priceless gold. I knew it was good when I watched it when I was younger, but man, it holds. It's amazing. I really, truly love that show, and I thought I'd share that with you. You guys should watch that. And anyway, there's that. Oh, yeah. I got the third number out. Well, it's out of the S10 anyway, so there's that. Bad news. Dummy me. See, you can see the ball bearings. I should have put silicone to put the axles in, because I was like, I don't want it to leak. I'm never taking these out again. Yeah, it ripped out the back part of the rubber on that. So now I got to change the bearings on this axles before I can even, after I get the gears back in. So that sucks. Anyway, there's your updates. You guys take care.